Okay, so this is a video that's going to talk about free will and choice and the idea of individual endeavor and personal achievement and that sort of thing, because that's a sort of a hot topic in this whole non-duality scene. You know, the idea of a person who could choose to investigate himself, or a person who could choose to meditate instead of doing drugs or something like that. So there's a paradox in that, because in my own apparent search, it seemed like there were lots of choices being made. You know, the choice to look within and find the person, or the choice to act out old patterns and conditioning. And you know, it's hard to make a blanket statement saying, you know, there is no free will or choice, or there is some free will and choice. The root of this whole dilemma is the seeing that there's no separate individual to whom any of that would apply. So it doesn't matter if there's free will and choice or no free will and choice or whatever, because there isn't actually anything separate to whom or to what that would apply. So to say, like, I have no choice, you know, I'm a person who has no choice. See, that's still within that modality of individualism. You see, it's like, I'm an entity who should choose differently, and there's an obligation, you know. I'm at the fork in the road now between this choice, and this choice, and I'm a separate entity that has to actually navigate its way into the correct choice, based on different ideas of, you know, morality, or if I'm religious, then God comes into that. Um, so you could say, in a practical sense, there can be a seeing of what goes into making choices. So it's sort of looking into this mechanism of the choice maker and seeing who is it, like scratching. Did I choose to scratch my head, or was that just a response? You know, an itch happens, scratching my arm now. So an itch happens, you know, my back, it's itchy, you know, it's like the body's itchy, so it gets scratched. Is there an individual who's choosing whether or not to do that? Because a lot of times I'd be sitting in a sort of, it's a sort of dilemma. It's like, which choice, you know, which is the right choice, and then finally reaching a conclusion, and oh God, did I make the right choice or the wrong choice? And it could be anything. It could be just a small thing, but the suffering that goes into it can be huge, because it's based on the idea that there is actually a separate person doing a doer that's actually initiating that action of its own center. So I'm a center, maybe in the head or in the body. It's a central thing that has its own volition. So you could say it's my will being done. I'm trying to do my will. Or maybe if I'm a religious person, then it's I'm trying to align my will with God's will, and I'm trying to make my will more like God's will, but I can never quite match it up properly, because I'm always falling short of the mark. And you know, God's will's here, and I'm trying to bring it up, bring my raise the bar or something, and try to get, you know, get above this sense of limitation so I can do God's will, which is really an attempt to get something in return for me. So another, not a, it's not really a topic, but it seems like there's different facets or aspects of this whole non-dual thing. But really, the core of it is always the idea of this entity, and it's whether it's real or not. This separate person, and the flip side of that is what is real if that isn't real. So it's two thing, or it's two sides of the same thing. Because if the separate person is seen to not be real, then what's left is what's real, which is simply, you know, changeless love, which sounds like a grandiose attainment, but it's simply the way things are anyway. And when the imaginary individual isn't operating as valid, then changeless awareness or love is seen to be what's what's actually real. Because Charlie Hayes mentions, the definition of real would have to be that which never changes. And this individual, the choice maker, apparently, it's always changing. So it's like, I'm never the same me twice. So the me I think I am now is not the same as the me I was when I started talking, because it's a concept that continually fluctuates based on the environment and conditioning and all of that stuff and DNA or whatever. So it's impossible to be the same person in even two consecutive apparent moments. And so the seeing of non-duality is the changelessness of what is. And that doesn't mean that things just stop into some sort of bizarre void or anything like that. Things just happen as they always have. But there's a freedom that emerges because there's no longer the sense of a volitionary entity that has to sort of navigate on its own path towards something better for itself. And so but of course, freedom implies, you know, a better state maybe for someone. But that's not the case. There's no better state on offer, and there's no one to be in that apparent state. The mind imagines all sorts of things. So if there was anything to say, it would simply be that everything can be dropped right now. Everything can be lost right now. And that sounds again like a practice. But if that's heard, if the notion that everything can be lost is heard, then that's it. This is it already. And that's a very common phrase. And it's meaningless. All the words spoken are obviously inadequate. Languages seem to be very small. There's a tininess about words, you could say, in comparison to the vastness of what is. The whole language thing, which previously was taken to be real, absolutely real, and important, and imbued with all kinds of meaning. Languages seem to be just a tiny, tiny little fragment of the totality of what is. Whereas before, language was actually the real. It was, it's like in the Bible, it talks about the Tower of Babel. We're building our language tower, trying to get to God, and then God destroys it. And we speak different languages, But language is just sounds, really. It's vibrations coming out of the changeless, But what happens is attention is always in words and concepts, and it seems like I'm a small entity that's in these meaningful concepts and navigating in this world of thought and action and fluctuation, and it becomes very problematic to deal with that because there's no stability in it, and there's always an attempt to sort of balance things out. So I'm trying to sort of make sure that I don't, I'm hoping and I'm fearing and I'm up and down and I'm trying to find stability. But as an individual, that can't happen because the individual is, in its nature, a sort of unstable concept that never sits still, so to speak. The individual can't be still. That would be the end of it. That would be the end of me. If stillness happened, that's actually the end of the me. And again, that's a fear. There's huge fear in this sort of message. It's a lot safer to be a Christian that believes that God will save me in time. And again, this is not anti-religion or anti-anything or pro-anything. This isn't even pro-non-duality. This is just a description of what is, fundamentally. And what is what's sought, which is completely baffling to the mind, which, the mind is really just one thought. So it's like the mind is imagined as sort of a whirling entity of its own, but it's really just a thought happening, one thought happening at a time, you could say. And that's it. And the seeing through of that, that's the end. So just look back and see, and that's all. Nothing special. Thank you.